Okay, the Arrma Big Rock. So you've scoured the internet and you're looking for videos and reviews of the Arrma Big Rock and maybe the Granite, and you're trying to compare the two, or maybe two of any other Arrma vehicle, and trying to decide which one to get. So there are a lot of people who have a lot of cars, collections of cars, who have a lot to say about each vehicle and know a lot about them. So why are you watching this video? I thought it may be helpful and relevant for some of you to understand or hear from a perspective of a person who's looking to buy just one car. There are a lot of people who are excited about these cars and actually have a collection, and then the question is more, which car should they get first of a series? I think it's fair to say that if you're only intending to buy one car, or maybe two cars, that you may be a little bit more critical about which car to get, making sure that it satisfies what you're looking for, the expectations, and all that. So obviously the different specifications and the physical attributes of each car will have an objective purpose, but I thought I'd talk more about my situation and how I stumbled upon Arrma and how I ultimately picked the Big Rock. So for me, my first RC car, serious RC car, was back in high school in 1998. And I had revived that at the beginning of the pandemic. And that car I had spent about $450, and by the time I got batteries and a charger and all that, it was like $750, which is way too much for a high school kid. So fast forward now, 2020, when the pandemic started, I had gotten a lot of budget RC cars. So just kind of getting my feet wet and buying stuff that's under $100 to kind of get back into it and see what it's about. And then after that, I got into FPV quadcopters. And so with the chips shortage, it's tough to get inventory for these vendors to sell replacement parts. So that wasn't really that reliable, and I was waiting for parts, and I thought I need another thing to entertain myself. So I ended up going back to RC cars, which I thought would be more reliable, being that they don't fly and crash on the ground. But RC cars do fly and crash into the ground. So I looked at Arrma, looked at Traxxas, looked at all the other ones. And what was important for me is to have a company that has parts that are readily available locally, or at least domestically, that I can purchase and have within days, as opposed to what I've been used to with budget vehicles coming from China and then ordering from AliExpress and Banggood, and it takes weeks to a month to get. So there is a cost to budget vehicles, and that cost is time, that you have to wait for all these parts. So number one is I really wanted something, again, that I can have parts readily available, so that if and when things break, then I can replace them easily and in a timely manner. Going with Arrma, the replacement parts and stuff like that, looking at those prices, I think is important for you before you pick which vehicle to get. That's something that sometimes people don't really look at until after they get the car and then are surprised by it. For instance, the slipper clutch assembly is pretty expensive, and that's $50. But most people are not going to need to buy an entire slipper clutch assembly. You'll probably just buy the spur gear, which I think is like $13. So those replacement pieces are not that expensive. And that is one thing to note when you're buying an RC car and deciding what to get. Arrma I really liked because of the quality of the material. And I liked that they had put time into their research and development to produce the modular system for the components, particularly the motor and the spur gear and the pinion, to be easily removed. Because I have worked on the other cars, and having worked on FPV quads, some of them can get really tough or challenging to take apart and put back together. So I know there's a lot of people, and I used to be like that when I was younger. I'd take apart toys that weren't meant to be taken apart just to see how they work and put them back together. But now as I get older, I'm actually not that excited to be wrenching on the bench, and I'd like to spend more time flying an FPV quad or driving an RC car. I know it comes with the territory and the hobby to be repairing, but I still do want the reliability and be operating the vehicle more than I am working on it. So that's just me. No disrespect to people who do like wrenching. That's just not my priority right now. So I did want something that was reliable. What I found for myself is that the environment matters a lot. So although I see YouTube videos just like you guys of the Big Rock and other cars, flying high, doing jumps, there's not a lot of that type of terrain near where I live, and I don't yet have a ramp or haven't made a ramp. So far I like drifting and running in dirt. So it's specifically in baseball diamonds. During the pandemic, the baseball diamonds are pretty much empty. And so drifting on this thing is a blast and it's a lot of fun. And so I do find that I do prefer something that's more grounded than something that necessarily handles better or well in the air. But it's nice to have the flexibility of being able to do that with the Big Rock as well. I did not want the Typhon because I wasn't really looking for something of that style. Again, I wanted the flexibility of being able to drive literally in any terrain. And so the monster truck style fits that pretty well. The reason why I wanted a monster truck style is I like the clearance and I do want to be able to drive off-road. My first RC car back in high school was an on-road four-wheel drive touring car. So the next legit car I wanted to get, I wanted to be a very different variety. And to have a vehicle that I can drive in different terrain just gives me the flexibility to be able to drive in various places. So being a father, being a dad, sometimes there's not a lot of time to be getting out. So when I am out with the kids or when I have a couple hours on my own, I would want to be able to drive a car and not be very specific on exactly where I need to drive it. So that's the choice for the monster truck. I did like the longer wheelbase of the Big Rock versus the Granite for stability. For the other car, the 16889, this guy can get squirrely when you want it to and can do jumps and all that kind of stuff. And so I wanted something that was kind of the opposite in a sense so that it can stay more grounded and not have to be as concerned about it flipping over when I didn't want it to. I do like doing wheelies and stuff like that. So this one can do that on demand, but it's not something that you necessarily need to hone down or control. I hear the Granite, because of the shorter wheelbase, tends to wheelie more often, and it's more about controlling it, not wheeling. Whereas this one, you can do full throttle and not really have to worry about it popping up, and you can take turns just fine. So yes, I too was attracted at the mega versions, meaning the brushed versions of the cars, due to the price tag. But having driven brushless cars, knowing their efficiency and their less maintenance of the motors and how they last longer and their speed, I knew that if I was going to spend hundreds of dollars instead of sub-$100, that I did want a brushless vehicle. So I did end up going one step higher than the Megas and then went for the 3S versions. Another way that I picked something from the 3S lineup as opposed to the brushed Mega category of the Arrma cars has to do with the speed. So the other cars I have, particularly the modded budget car, tops out about 25-ish miles an hour. And so if I were to get a brushed one that goes 30, it's not that much more. I just feel like if I'm gonna spend more money on more stuff, that I should do more things. And so the top speed of this hitting 50 miles an hour out of the box is very attractive and is definitely a bigger jump from what I have currently. So why did I go for a 3S RC car as opposed to a 4S or a 6S or an 8S? First of all, 8S is just way, way, way beyond my budget. And 6S is still beyond my budget. The reason I didn't go for 4S is because I was very aware of battery inventory. So with FPV quads, I have ideally 8 batteries per quad. And what that allows me to do is to charge in the field. So by the time I'm done with the last few packs, the first couple are done charging and I can just keep on going. It's basically endless until I run out of juice in the source battery that powers the charger in the field. I found that the source battery, or the battery I use to charge other smaller FPV quad batteries, fits in here perfectly. So it's a 3S 8,000 milliamp hour battery. So it's pretty heavy. This vehicle is pretty heavy already. As I'm holding it, I'm kind of resting on my shoulder because it's so heavy holding it up for you guys. So by having the 3S RC car, I can reuse that battery. And not only that, but on my next car, if I do tend to get another car, it would be a 6S so that I can, again, reuse the 3S batteries that I have. If I were to go 4S, then I would have to either buy 4S batteries or buy a bunch of new 2S batteries. I do prefer having batteries that have multiple purposes. So for instance, the budget RC car that I picked up earlier, The battery that operates that also operates the battery for my FPV goggles. And so same battery, dual purpose. It's about kind of simplifying my battery inventory. They're just having LiPo batteries and keeping them in storage charge, and then charging them and planning your day, and then if things don't pan out, then you gotta storage charge it again. So I'm pretty much of a stickler when it comes to storage charging and keeping batteries well maintained and safety and all that. And so I do like to have fewer batteries to maintain. It just kind of makes life easier. Last car that I got, not the last car, but a car that is a budget vehicle, was actually this guy. And this is a HBX 16889. And so this is under $100. You can spend about 20 bucks and put oil-filled shocks in there, and it's actually really good. It's a 16 scale, and it runs amazing. It's actually a lot of fun. And having a budget car that is less pricey, you tend to be more willing to do little more risky things with it. And so in that sense, it's a lot of fun. But again, those parts are from China. So when things break, it takes time to get pieces back. As far as reliability, that one's pretty reliable. Another reason I picked the Big Rock over the Granite is because of its sheer size. So the size is just, to me, it's overwhelmingly big. I know it's not a Kraton 8S, but relative to the other cars I have, it's giant. I mean, the size of the wheel is literally the height of the entire car. So I just like that it's massive. It's definitely the biggest car that I have. If I got the Granite, I feel like, not that it would be underwhelming, but I think just the excitement of having a giant RC car, I think is pretty cool. Coming from the FPV world, I started on Whoops, which are basically baby quadcopters or baby drones. And soldering those literally pieces like this with solder pads that are literally 1.5 millimeters and spaced out like 0.5 millimeter are just very frustrating to work on. And so even though 10 scale cars are fairly large, I was attracted by the fact that the Big Rock has a bigger chassis or longer wheelbase. And so the spacing between the components is that much larger. And it's not that I have significantly big hands, but I think by having something larger, it's just easier to get into certain areas of either the suspension or the chassis itself, and getting to ESCs and motors and things like that. I know that the components and everything are pretty much identical to the Granite, but I think the spacing of everything is a small thing, but it was something I looked at and considered before choosing the Big Rock. Speaking of size, for me, I do think a lot about where the car is going to go when I'm not driving it, meaning storage space. So it's really important to me that I have a dedicated space for a vehicle or for anything that I buy, because I just don't like the clutter of having stuff just everywhere. And so that was an important thing too. And I'm also building an RC car racetrack. Although I started building it after I bought this, it is designed for a 10 scale or smaller. It's a 6.5 foot to 7 foot wide track. And so this would fit perfectly. My concern if I were to get another Arrma vehicle is that I wouldn't necessarily want it to be too much larger, because it just wouldn't fit the track as well. And due to the limited space and the trees and stuff like that on site, making it bigger or lanes wider really isn't a viable option. And so the 10 scale happens to work out for me in that sense. So some of you may have a lot of space and can afford space-wise to store something that's larger. I know some of you have rooms that are man caves that are dedicated to RC cars and other toys. But that's not something I utilize. So I do want to have a space that I can put this comfortably. And for me, that's in my garage. With this cabinetry, it's actually up on top. Not only for display, but it's easier to pop in my car when I go out and I use this thing. So thinking about size in that terms may be important to you as well. So just like all of you, I've compared between, this thing is heavy, between Big Rock and Granite. I decided on the Big Rock. What attracted me most was just the rarity of it. The Big Rock would seem to be in higher demand. That may not be a reason that you want to get it necessarily, but I think that will kind of coax me into it. I generally, and still don't like the black on black murdered outlook. I'd rather have accent colors, and I do like the accent colors of the Granite much better. I've started to kind of like this, but still black on black isn't really my thing. Do they have clear bodies? Yes, they do. It's not something that Arrma advertises, so not everyone really knows about it, but the Big Rock does have a clear body version that goes for $30 retail. So you can go ahead and buy that and paint it however you like. And so again, that's not something that's commonly done, but it's definitely an option in case you don't like the black on black on black and want to create a project of your own and put something together more to your liking. I don't want to talk too much about the issues I've had with the Big Rock in this particular video. There are a few of them, and I just want to be able to have time to run it over in detail. So I'm going to put it in a different video because I know some of you looking at the title of this video aren't necessarily looking for that specifically, but some of you may end up wanting to see that. So I'm going to put that in a separate video and we'll talk about that in a lot of detail. But the short of it is I'm still glad I got this. I like it. I do wish that I knew a little bit more about it. At least the little nuances and little issues that people have had with this car that are kind of known issues. Apparently I either didn't do enough research or I didn't get deep into enough to really know that before I got the car. Would it have stopped me from getting this car? No, I don't think it would have. But it's nice to be prepared budget-wise, and maybe I would have bought extra parts along with this vehicle at that time, or just kind of mentally be prepared for that, because it's always disappointing when you bring a car home and then you're driving it mildly and it breaks and then you don't know what's going on, then you research it and then you got to buy the part and there's downtime, you got to wait for it. I mean, again, I got this car because inventory is good generally, and cars can come by pretty quickly, but still I suffer from RC car separation anxiety. So I do like to have them running as much as I can. That's why the Arrma Big Rock, and hopefully this video helped you a bit on at least understanding and context of why I picked it. I'm not necessarily pushing for you to buy it or pushing you not to buy it, because I don't know who you are. So it really depends on what you're looking for, the terrain, your budget, how much time you have to be driving the car, whether you like wrenching or not wrenching, things of that nature. And so hopefully it helped you to get in context again of how one person who's pretty critical about purchases decided to buy the Big Rock. And so you may have thoughts on your own on, oh, I thought of that too, and that does apply to me. Or you may have heard things in this video where you're like, I don't really care, like that doesn't matter to me. And so either way, you have something in context that you can kind of make a decision for yourself on what would be good. So if you have any comments or questions or whatnot below, go ahead and leave those comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And we'll see you the next video for the issues I had with the Big Rock and why they're not that big of a deal, but how you should prepare for them, how much money you should spend trying to fix or resolve those things. And then we'll go from there. All right, take care. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.